The quantum-dampened hull of the Zornak scout vessel HMS Razor's Edge hummed with a low, almost imperceptible vibration that most species would have missed entirely. But Captain Kralax wasn't most species. His species, the Zornak, had evolved on a high-gravity world of perpetual storms, developing sensory capabilities that made them legendary reconnaissance experts across 3 galactic sectors. His 6 neural-linked eyes scanned the bridge, each one independently tracking different quantum signatures, magnetic fluctuations, and spatial anomalies. Something was wrong. Profoundly, fundamentally wrong. "Status report," he barked, his translator rendering the complex series of clicks and subsonic growls into standard galactic communication protocol. Lieutenant Serac, the youngest sensor analyst on board, didn't immediately respond. Her 3-fingered hands were moving across the holographic interface with a speed that suggested either panic or profound concentration. The bridge crew knew Serac. She was a prodigy, the kind of analyst who had been fast-tracked through the Confederation's most rigorous training programs. If she was this focused, something extraordinary was happening. "Lieutenant," Kralax repeated, a dangerous edge creeping into his voice. Serac's head snapped up, her iridescent skin momentarily shifting from its standard blue-green to a pale, almost translucent white, a physiological response that indicated extreme stress or excitement. "Sir, we're detecting a quantum interference pattern that, well, it shouldn't exist." The bridge fell silent. The Zornak were not a species prone to dramatic reactions. They had explored over 10,000 star systems, encountered 247 distinct intelligent species, and maintained a reputation for clinical, almost mathematical approach to exploration. When Serac said something shouldn't exist, it meant something truly unprecedented was occurring. "Clarify," Kralax demanded. Serac's fingers danced across the interface, pulling up a holographic representation that made several bridge crew members instinctively take a step back. It was a spatial rendering that looked like a living nightmare of physics, a vessel that seemed to simultaneously occupy multiple quantum states. "The object is generating a quantum signature that suggests simultaneous existence in multiple dimensional planes," she explained. "But that's impossible. Our current understanding of quantum mechanics is clearly insufficient," Kralax finished for her. The shadow had materialized differently for each of them. To the ship's quantum sensors, it was a complex interference pattern. To the visual systems, it was a shimmer, a distortion that looked like heat waves rising from a desert. Except this was the cold, infinite void of space. Sensor Chief Mizralix, a veteran with over 2 centuries of deep space exploration, leaned forward. His secondary respiratory system was already preparing emergency protocols. "Captain, the spatial distortion is generating 0 electromagnetic radiation. No heat signature, no gravitational displacement. It's as if something is deliberately hiding its existence." Kralax knew that feeling. It was the same sensation he'd experienced decades ago when they'd first discovered the quantum-locked artifacts in the Omega Nebula, a technological marvel so advanced it had taken their best scientists a decade to understand even its most basic principles. "Full spectrum scan," he ordered. "I want every possible wavelength, every quantum resolution, every theoretical penetration method activated." The ship's systems responded instantly. Trillion-dollar sensor arrays that could detect a single electron's movement across light years began their intricate dance. Quantum entanglement arrays stretched out invisible tendrils of investigation. Graviton displacement sensors created a web of analytical precision that would make most species' scientific equipment look like children's toys. And then something happened that would be recorded in Zornak historical archives for generations. The scan pushed back. It wasn't a normal sensor interaction. Normally, when a scan encountered an object, it would return data. Information would flow from the scanned object back to the scanning vessel. But this time, the moment their sensors touched the shadowy vessel, there was a distinct sensation of being analyzed in return. Lieutenant Serac's hands froze mid-motion. "Captain," she whispered, "I think it's scanning us back." Kralax felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 centuries of space exploration. Pure, unadulterated uncertainty. The shadow waited, patient, calculating, almost amused. Lead science. Officer Vren had seen impossible things in his 287 years of service. He'd witnessed the quantum stabilization of neutron stars, decoded communication patterns from silicon-based life forms, and once spent a decade unraveling the mathematical language of a civilization that communicated through prime number sequences. But this was beyond anything in his considerable experience. The first probe, a quantum entanglement scanner capable of analyzing matter at the subatomic level, didn't just fail. It was systematically dismantled, its information absorbed, and then reconstructed into something entirely new. Impossible, Vren muttered, his multi-jointed fingers flying across the holographic interface. Each movement sent ripples of bioluminescent data across his scaled skin, a natural evolutionary trait that allowed Zornak scientists to visualize complex data streams through chromatic changes. The metamaterial hull of the human vessel was doing something that violated every known principle of material science. What had initially appeared to be a simple titanium-chromium alloy was now demonstrating properties that defied fundamental physics. Molecular reconfiguration rate, Vren called out. Calculate and project. The ship's central AI, a quantum neural network with more processing power than entire planetary research complexes, began its analysis. Holographic projections erupted around the bridge, showing the hull's molecular structure in real time. It was changing, not just adapting, but actively redesigning itself. A standard titanium molecule would typically have a fixed crystalline structure. This hull was different. Each molecule acted like a living system, with internal communication networks that made biological neural systems look primitive. When the Zornak probe attempted to analyze its composition, the hull didn't just resist, it learned. Lieutenant Sarek, still reeling from the initial encounter, noticed something even more disturbing. The hull is watching us, she said, her voice a mixture of scientific fascination and primal fear. Vren understood immediately. Most species developed defensive technologies. This was different. This was a system that didn't just defend, it anticipated, learned and transformed. The probe's data began to stream back, and with each millisecond the complexity became more apparent. The hull was generating new molecular configurations faster than the Zornak's most advanced supercomputers could calculate potential variations. It was as if the ship itself was a massive living research laboratory, continuously solving problems before they could even be fully articulated. Quantum stability index, Vren demanded. Full spectrum analysis. The results were madness given physical form. The hull could transition between states that should be mutually exclusive. One moment it demonstrated the rigid strength of a neutronium-based defense grid. The next it became as flexible as liquid metal, capable of absorbing and redistributing kinetic energy in ways that made traditional force absorption look like a child's crude experiment. Sensor Chief Miralix approached Vren, his secondary respiratory system whirring with excitement and terror. "Do you understand what this means?" he asked, his translator rendering his complex vocal patterns into crisp, clinical standard speech. Vren nodded slowly. "This isn't just advanced technology. This is a complete reimagining of what technology can be." The hull was generating new molecular bonds that incorporated information from the scanning probes. Each attempted analysis was not just deflected, but transformed into additional adaptive capability. It was learning, evolving, solving at a rate that suggested something beyond mere artificial intelligence. This was technological sentience. A secondary scan revealed something even more terrifying. The hull's adaptive capabilities weren't limited to physical defense. It was generating predictive models, understanding the Zornak scanning methodology so quickly that it could generate counter-strategies before the strategies themselves were fully formed. "It's not just defending," Sarek whispered. "It's teaching itself how we think." The holographic displays began to fill with cascading data streams, molecular reconfiguration patterns that looked less like technical schematics and more like complex living artwork. Each molecule was a problem-solving unit, each atomic bond a potential solution to challenges that hadn't even been conceived. Vren realized they were looking at more than a ship. This was a statement, a declaration of a fundamentally different approach to existence. The human vessel waited, patient and impossibly alive. The historical archives materialized around the bridge like a ghostly accusatory jury. Holographic displays flickered with humanity's brutal, chaotic history, a timeline that made most galactic civilizations look like carefully managed research projects. Captain Krelax watched in a mixture of horror and fascination. The first projection showed Earth in the early 21st century, a planet teetering on the brink of multiple extinction-level challenges. Climate catastrophes, resource wars, technological disruptions, and societal fractures that would have annihilated any other species. The Zornak had records of civilizations that collapsed for far less. But humans? They did something else entirely. Dr. Rentok, the ship's historical analyst, began narrating. His voice was a clinical translation of pure disbelief. Observe the progression. Where other species would have fragmented, humans transformed each challenge into an evolutionary catalyst. The displays began to show rapid-fire sequences, a global pandemic that forced unprecedented medical innovation, economic collapses that sparked complete reimaginings of resource distribution, environmental challenges that drove breakthrough sustainable technologies. Each disaster became a crucible of innovation. Their first interplanetary colonies, Dr. Rentok continued, were not government projects. They were crowd-funded, privately developed initiatives that emerged from what they called startup culture. The word startup seemed to require special translation protocols, as if the concept was too alien to directly translate. Lieutenant Sarek leaned forward, her neural interfaces pulling additional contextual data. They weaponized creativity as a survival mechanism, she observed. Where we see obstacles, they saw optimization problems. The timeline accelerated. By the mid-22nd century, humans had transformed their most significant weaknesses into unprecedented strengths. Climate change research led to revolutionary energy technologies. Resource scarcity drove molecular manufacturing breakthroughs. Societal conflicts produced advanced artificial intelligence focused on conflict resolution. Captain Krelax noted something disturbing. Most galactic civilizations followed a predictable technological progression. Initial technological development. Resource accumulation. Careful, measured expansion. Technological stabilization. Humans had done something entirely different. Their progression looked more like constant, chaotic disruption, immediate technological adaptation, turning every limitation into an opportunity. Exponential, non-linear innovation. Their first faster-than-light drive, Dr. Rentok said, zooming into a schematic that looked more like an artistic rendering than a technical diagram, was developed not by a government space agency, but by a collective of university researchers, private investors, and open-source contributors. The ship's AI began calculating the statistical improbability. A civilization developing faster-than-light travel through a decentralized collaborative process. Impossible. And yet, the evidence was right in front of them. Censor Chief Meralex discovered something even more shocking in the archives. Humans had multiple competing technological development models simultaneously. While one group pursued traditional rocket technology, another was developing quantum entanglement communication. A third was exploring biological technological hybrid systems. They didn't just innovate, they innovated in parallel, across multiple paradigms. Their first contact with alien civilizations, Dr. Rentok noted, was not a military encounter. It was a scientific exchange initiated by a private research consortium. The historical record showed a species that didn't just adapt to change, they actively sought it. Economic models that encouraged disruption, educational systems that rewarded creative problem-solving, a culture that celebrated failure as a necessary step to innovation. Captain Krelax felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries of exploration. Genuine, visceral uncertainty. The human timeline was not a linear progression. It was an exponential explosion of possibility. Each technological breakthrough seemed to generate multiple new fields of research. Where the Zornak might spend decades perfecting a single technological approach, humans would develop 10 alternative methods simultaneously. They didn't just develop technology, Sarek whispered, her voice a mixture of terror and reverence. They transformed the entire concept of technological development. The archives continued their relentless display. Quantum computing breakthroughs, nanoscale manufacturing, fusion energy solutions, biological augmentation technologies. Each advancement more mind-bending than the last. Parallax calculated the progression rates. Their technological development doesn't follow a curve, he said. It's more like an uncontrolled burn, consuming every limitation and transforming it into potential. The human ship waited outside, a silent testament to this impossible evolution. Doom indeed was inevitable. The ship's AI, a quantum neural network christened Oracle 9, began its psychological analysis, and immediately encountered something fundamentally incomprehensible. Most species had predictable psychological matrices. The Zornak themselves were a perfect example, hierarchical, methodical, with decision-making processes that could be mapped with near-mathematical precision. Quantum psychologists could predict entire societal responses with 99.7% accuracy, but the human psychological signature was chaos given conscious form. Dr. Lyra Vren, the ship's lead xenopsychological analyst and niece of the senior science officer, leaned forward, her neural interfaces creating a complex holographic representation of the human vessel's psychological profile. It's not just adaptive, she muttered more to herself than to the bridge crew. It's alive. The psychological scan wasn't returning data. It was engaging in a conversation. Each probe sent by the Zornak AI was not just analyzed but reinterpreted, transformed, and sent back with additional layers of complexity. Where a standard psychological assessment would create a static profile, this was more like a living, breathing dialogue. Oracle 9's quantum processors began to overheat. Not from computational complexity, but from something closer to confusion. The human psychological signature demonstrated multiple simultaneous cognitive states that should be mutually exclusive. Extreme individualism coexisting with collaborative problem-solving, destructive competitive instincts alongside profound empathy, paralyzing self-doubt existing simultaneously with unbounded confidence, technological rationalism intertwined with creative irrationality. Captain Krellax watched the holographic displays with growing unease. The psychological profile looked less like a scientific assessment and more like a work of abstract art, constantly shifting, defying categorization. They don't just think differently, Dr. Lyra Vren explained, her skin shifting through a kaleidoscope of analytical colors. They conceptualize thinking itself as a fluid, transformative process. A recovered communication fragment provided additional context. It was a transmission log from the USS Prometheus 7, seemingly a casual communication between crew members. But to the Zornak, it was a window into an alien world of cognitive complexity. Excerpt began. Transmission log, USS Prometheus 7, internal crew communication. Operative Chen, the quantum stabilization matrix is 0.03% off predicted parameters. Operative Rodriguez. Interesting. Let's gamify the solution. First one to optimize gets dinner cooked by the other. Operative Dr. Miyamoto. Challenge accepted. I'm bringing my great-grandmother's fusion cuisine algorithm. The Zornak AI spent 17 minutes attempting to decode the psychological implications of this seemingly mundane exchange. 17 minutes. For a quantum AI that could perform quintillion calculations per second, this was an eternity. The communication revealed multiple layers of complexity. A work challenge transformed into a social bonding ritual. Serious scientific problem-solving integrated with personal interaction. Cultural exchange embedded within technical communication. Competitive motivation used as a collaborative tool. Dr. Lyra Vren's analysis grew more complex. They don't distinguish between work, play, learning, and social interaction. These are integrated experiences, not separate domains. Sensor Chief Moralex discovered something even more disturbing in the psychological profiles. Humans didn't just solve problems, they derived profound emotional satisfaction from the process of problem-solving itself. Their technological innovations weren't just functional achievements, they were expressions of creativity, personal growth, collective challenge. The ship's AI began generating potential interaction scenarios. Normally, these would be clinical, precise mathematical models. But with the human psychological signature, the scenarios looked more like improvised jazz, complex, improvisational, defying standard predictive models. They treat technological innovation like an art form, Dr. Lyra Vren said, her voice a mixture of scientific precision and something closer to reverence. Not just a means to an end, but an ongoing creative dialogue with possibility itself. The psychological scan continued, each moment revealing new layers of complexity. The human vessel wasn't just a technological marvel, it was a living testament to a fundamentally different way of experiencing existence. Cognitive flexibility, emotional resilience, transformative thinking. These weren't just psychological traits. They were weapons more potent than any quantum disruptor. The human ship waited, patient and impossibly alive, watching, learning, understanding. The transmission arrived not as a standard communication, but as a multidimensional data package that seemed to defy the very concept of information transfer. Captain Krelax felt it before he saw it. A subtle vibration that wasn't electromagnetic, wasn't gravitational, something that touched the edges of perception itself. Lieutenant Sarek's hands froze mid-motion. The holographic interfaces around her began to shimmer, transforming from standard Zornak blue-green technical displays into something else entirely. It was as if the very fabric of communication was being rewritten in real time. Decryption. Protocols are, she paused, searching for the right word, irrelevant. The data package wasn't encrypted. It was an invitation, a comprehensive, multi-layered narrative that was simultaneously a technological blueprint, a historical document, and what could only be described as a philosophical discourse. The first layer was historical, not a clinical timeline, but a living, breathing account of human development that read like an epic saga. It wasn't just information, it was storytelling. Humanity's progression was presented as a continuous problem-solving exercise. Global, conflicts weren't just wars, they were complex challenges that drove innovation. Economic collapses weren't failures, they were opportunities for systemic reimagination. Environmental challenges weren't catastrophes, they were invitations to technological evolution. Dr. Lyra Vren, her neural interfaces working overtime, began to translate. "It's not a communication," she whispered. "It's a complete cognitive framework. The transmission contained detailed technological blueprints, historical narratives, philosophical insights, problem-solving methodologies, cultural context, potential, collaborative research proposals, but it was the approach that made the Zornik crew collectively pause. This wasn't a unilateral communication. It was an open invitation to a dialogue that transcended traditional interspecies contact. A subsection caught Sensor Chief Moralax's attention. It was a comprehensive breakdown of how humans approached first contact, not as a military or diplomatic exercise, but as a mutual learning opportunity. "We are not here to conquer," one section read. "We are here to collaborate. Every civilization is a unique solution to the challenge of existence." The technological blueprints were even more staggering. They weren't just schematics, they were adaptive templates. Each blueprint contained multiple potential implementation strategies, with annotations explaining the cognitive and cultural contexts that might influence technological adaptation. Captain Krelax realized something profound. This wasn't just a communication. It was an entire methodology of interaction. The USS Prometheus 7's transmission demonstrated a fundamental truth. For humans, technology wasn't a product. It was a conversation. Dr. Lyra Vren's analysis began to crystallize. "They're not offering technology," she said. her voice a mixture of scientific precision and something closer to wonder. They're offering a methodology of innovation. Embedded within the transmission were open-source research protocols, collaborative development frameworks, adaptive learning methodologies, psychological resilience strategies, technological innovation, templates. Each component was annotated with multiple perspectives. Where a Zornak technical document might have a single, precise interpretation, these human documents contained multiple potential readings, alternative implementations, and philosophical context. A specific section caught Captain Krelax's attention, a detailed breakdown of how humans transformed global challenges into collaborative research opportunities. Climate change wasn't just an environmental issue, it was an invitation to reimagine energy systems, urban design, and global cooperation. The transmission continued to unfold, each moment revealing new layers of complexity. It wasn't just information, it was an entire worldview, a methodology of existence. Sensor Chief Miralax calculated the transmission's complexity. "This is beyond communication," he said. "This is a live, adaptive knowledge transfer." The USS Prometheus 7 waited, not as a threat, not as a conqueror, but as a potential collaborator, an invitation to a different way of understanding existence itself. Doom was inevitable, but not in any way they had previously understood. Captain Krelax ordered a tactical assessment with the clinical precision of a veteran commander who had navigated hundreds of potential conflict scenarios. What the ship's systems revealed defied every known principle of warfare. The weapon systems of the USS Prometheus 7 were not weapons. They were possibilities given physical form. Sensor Chief Miralax began the analysis, his neural interfaces creating holographic projections that made several bridge crew members instinctively take a step back. Each weapon system was a living, adaptive network that seemed to breathe with an almost organic intelligence. Take the quantum entanglement field generator. In any other species' arsenal, this would be a straightforward defensive mechanism. For humans, it was a multi-dimensional problem-solving platform. The device could disable entire fleet formations, redistribute energy across multiple dimensional planes, create localized reality distortion fields, analyze and neutralize incoming threats before they fully materialized, generate alternative conflict resolution strategies in real time. Dr. Lyra Vren's analysis revealed something even more disturbing. These weren't just weapon systems. They were comprehensive threat assessment and resolution platforms. They don't see combat as destruction, she explained, her neural interfaces painting complex holographic patterns. They see it as the most extreme form of problem solving. A recovered tactical log from the ship's communication archives provided context. Tactical log, USS Prometheus 7, conflict resolution simulation. Operative, Chen. Incoming threat vector demonstrates a 73.6% probability of unresolvable conflict. Operative Rodriguez. Challenge accepted. Let's map alternative resolution scenarios. Operative Dr. Miyamoto. Initiating multidimensional conflict transformation protocol. The Zornak tactical AI spent 17 minutes analyzing this single exchange. 17 minutes to understand a communication that most species would dismiss as casual conversation. The weapon systems demonstrated a fundamental reimagining of conflict. Energy dispersal mechanisms that could transform incoming attacks into power sources. Targeting systems that predicted enemy actions before they were conceived. Defensive technologies that learned and adapted faster than any known biological intelligence. Conflict resolution algorithms that prioritized minimum potential. Damage. Captain Krelax watched in growing horror as the tactical analysis continued. These weren't just advanced weapons. They were comprehensive existential problem-solving platforms. The ship's primary offensive capability, if offensive was even the right word, was a quantum resonance disruptor that didn't just destroy. It could analyze the entire technological and cultural context of a potential conflict, generate multiple alternative resolution scenarios, provide comprehensive diplomatic and technological pathways to prevent escalation, essentially solve a conflict before it could fully emerge, Sensor Chief Mir Alex discovered something even more terrifying. The weapon systems were generating configurations that didn't exist in any known database. They were designing combat solutions in real time, treating warfare as a complex, multi-dimensional optimization problem. "They don't prepare for war," Dr. Lyra Vren said, her voice a mixture of scientific precision and something closer to philosophical revelation. "They prepare for comprehensive problem resolution." The tactical systems demonstrated an approach to conflict that was fundamentally alien. Prioritize information gathering over destruction, generate multiple potential resolution scenarios, minimize potential damage to all parties, transform conflict into a collaborative problem-solving exercise. A subsystem caught Captain Krelax's attention. It was a diplomatic interface integrated directly into the weapon systems. Most species would see this as a contradiction. For humans, it was a natural extension of their comprehensive approach to challenge resolution. The USS Prometheus 7's tactical systems were not about winning. They were about understanding, about finding the most elegant, least destructive path through complex scenarios. Weapon, diplomat, researcher, mediator. These were not separate functions. They were integrated approaches to existence. The human ship waited, its weapon systems humming with a subtle, almost playful intelligence. Watching, learning, understanding. Doom was inevitable, but not in any way they had ever imagined. The transmission from Zornak High Command arrived like a digital dying gasp, fragmented, desperate, and filled with a terror that transcended traditional communication protocols. Captain Krelax watched the holographic display with a sense of mounting dread that he had not experienced in 3 centuries of interstellar exploration. Preliminary galactic survey confirms, the transmission read, "Human technological development represents a civilization-level existential paradigm shift." Those words would be studied by xenohistorians for generations. The data packages began to cascade across the bridge displays. Not clinical reports, but a comprehensive breakdown of humanity's technological progression that read more like a mythological epic than a scientific document. Lieutenant Sarak's neural interfaces began to overheat from the sheer informational density. Her skin shifted through complex chromatic patterns, a Zornak physiological response to extreme cognitive processing. The report revealed layers of technological development that defied every known model of civilizational advancement. Technological progression, breakdown, year 2020, 2050, global survival adaptation period, climate crisis transformed into renewable energy revolution, pandemic response generates unprecedented medical innovation, economic disruption leads to decentralized economic models. Year 2050-2100, exponential innovation epoch, quantum computing becomes universally accessible, molecular manufacturing eliminates traditional resource constraints, artificial intelligence integrated as collaborative problem-solving tool. Year 2100-2150, transdisciplinary transformation, biological-technological hybrid systems emerge, space colonization driven by private-public collaborative models, education reimagined as continuous, adaptive learning platform. Year 2150-2200, galactic emergence phase. First faster-than-light technologies developed through open-source collaboration, interstellar communication protocols designed as adaptive learning systems, technological innovation treated as collective. Creative expression sensor Chief Mr. Alex calculated the progression rates and nearly shut down from computational shock. This wasn't linear growth. This was exponential non-linear transformation that looked more like a living organism than a technological civilization. "They don't develop technology," Dr. Lyra Vren whispered, her voice a mixture of terror and reverence. "They metabolize challenges into innovation." The most shocking revelation came from the deep archaeological records. Humans had transformed every major civilizational challenge into a collaborative research opportunity. Climate change became a planetary-scale engineering project. Economic inequalities became platforms for innovative resource distribution models. Technological limitations were treated as invitations to reimagine fundamental scientific paradigms. A recovered communication fragment provided chilling context. Archival. Communication. Global Innovation Consortium. Researcher Alpha. We're facing a potentially civilization-ending challenge. Researcher Beta. Excellent. What innovative solutions can we develop? Researcher Gamma. Let's gamify the solution. Fastest team gets planetary recognition. The Zornak High Command's transmission continued, each paragraph more mind-bending than the last. Humans do not see technological development as a linear progression. They treat it as a continuous adaptive conversation with possibility itself. Their innovation model does not distinguish between scientific research, creative expression, collaborative problem-solving survival strategy. Captain Krelax realized something profound. This wasn't just a technological civilization. This was a species that had transformed innovation into a fundamental evolutionary strategy. The USS Prometheus 7 waited outside, a silent testament to this impossible evolution. Preliminary galactic threat assessments were being rewritten in real time. Humanity was not a potential threat. They were a fundamental reimagining of what a technological civilization could be. Dr. Lyra Vren's final analysis cut through the complexity. They are not conquerors. They are transformation agents. Every interaction is an opportunity to solve, to improve, to collaborate. The ship's quantum AI generated potential interaction scenarios. Where previous models would create clinical, predictive matrices, these looked more like living, breathing ecosystems of possibility. Miralax made a calculation that would be quoted in xenosociological texts for centuries. The probability of traditional galactic power structures surviving human emergence was less than 0.003%. The transmission ended with a statement that would haunt the Zornak Confederation. Humanity is not arriving. Humanity is transforming. Doom was inevitable, but it was a doom of limitation, of old thinking, and humanity was here to rescue the galaxy from itself. The final moments of the scan were not a conclusion. They were an invitation. Captain Krelax felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 centuries of space exploration. Genuine, visceral uncertainty transformed into profound curiosity. The USS Prometheus 7 began transmitting not as a conqueror, not as a threat, but as something far more complex. It was simultaneously offering comprehensive technological blueprints, solved planetary challenge models, collaborative research frameworks, adaptive learning methodologies, cultural exchange protocols. Dr. Lyra Vren's neural interfaces were overwhelmed. This wasn't just information transfer. This was a living, breathing dialogue with possibility itself. "They're not sharing technology," she whispered, her skin shifting through colors that represented deep cognitive processing. "They're offering a methodology of existence." The transmission contained solutions to challenges that had paralyzed galactic civilizations for millennia. Sustainable energy generation models that could transform entire planetary ecosystems, adaptive medical technologies that could revolutionize species-wide health approaches, quantum communication protocols that could bridge fundamentally different cognitive architectures, resource distribution frameworks that reimagined economic interactions. A recovered communication fragment provided context, transmission log, USS Prometheus 7, mission parameters, Commander Elena Rodriguez. Our primary mission isn't exploration. It's collaborative problem-solving. Science Officer Dr. Hiroshi Miyamoto. Every civilization is a unique solution to the challenge of existence. Our job is to learn, share, and grow together. Engineering Specialist Marcus Chen. Optimization is a collective endeavor. The Zornak crew realized something profound. This wasn't an invasion. This was an evolutionary catalyst. The technological blueprints were mind-bending in their complexity. Each solution was adaptable to multiple planetary contexts, open source, by design, accompanied by comprehensive implementation guides, designed with multiple potential interpretation pathways. Sensor Chief Ms. Ralex discovered something even more shocking. The solutions weren't just technically brilliant, they were psychologically nuanced. Each technological blueprint contained cultural adaptation strategies, potential psychological integration methods, collaborative implementation frameworks, mechanisms for local innovation and modification. They don't see technology as a product, Dr. Lyra Vren explained, her voice a mixture of scientific precision and philosophical revelation. They see it as a conversation, a continuous, adaptive dialogue with possibility. The transmission continued to unfold, revealing layers of complexity that defied traditional understanding, collaborative research principles. No single perspective holds absolute truth. Diversity of approach is a fundamental strength. Failure is a necessary step in innovation. Learning is a continuous collective process. Technological development is a form of cultural expression. Captain Krellex watched as the ship's quantum AI attempted to process this approach. Where previous interaction models would create rigid, predictive matrices, these looked more like living, breathing ecosystems of potential. The most radical component was almost hidden in the transmission's depths, a comprehensive framework for interspecies collaborative development. It wasn't just about sharing technology. It was about creating a galactic ecosystem of collective problem-solving. "We are not here to conquer," one subsection read. "We are here to collaborate. Every civilization represents a unique solution to the challenge of existence. Our strength is not in domination, but in collective growth." Miralix calculated something that would be quoted in xenosociological texts for centuries. The probability of traditional galactic power structures surviving this approach was less than 0.03%, but it wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. The USS Prometheus 7 waited, not as a conqueror, not as a superior force, but as a potential collaborator, an invitation to a different way of understanding existence itself. The final transmission contained a message that would be studied for generations. Humanity is not a destination. Humanity is a journey, and we invite you to journey with us. Doom was inevitable, but it was a doom of limitation, of old thinking, and humanity was here to rescue the galaxy from itself.